Can an entire civilization disappear from the pages of history? This is not just a poetic question, but a deeply unsettling reality that echoes through time, raising doubts about how we understand progress, power, and human memory. Throughout history, countless empires have risen and fallen, yet few stories are as haunting, as intellectually rich, and as emotionally complex as that of Al-Andalus, the Muslim civilization that once flourished in the Iberian Peninsula. It was a society that stood at the crossroads of continents, cultures, and ideas, a place where knowledge was cultivated, diversity was lived, and innovation shaped the future. And yet, despite its brilliance, it ultimately vanished, leaving behind not just architectural ruins, but questions that remain unanswered even today. The story begins in 711 AD, when a relatively small Muslim force, led by the young and determined general Tariq ibn Ziyad, crossed the narrow waters separating North Africa from Europe. This crossing was not merely a military maneuver, it was the beginning of a transformation that would alter the course of European history. Landing on the rocky shores near a towering mountain that would later be named Jabal Tariq, Gibraltar, Tariq and his soldiers stood at the edge of the unknown. According to historical accounts, he addressed his men with words that would become legendary. "Behind you is the sea, and before you the enemy." Whether literal or symbolic, this statement captured the essence of their situation. There was no turning back. What lay ahead was uncertainty, challenge, and destiny. The initial confrontations, particularly the Battle of Guadalete, marked a decisive turning point. The Visigothic kingdom, which ruled much of Iberia at the time, was weakened by internal divisions and political instability. Within a remarkably short period, Muslim forces advanced across vast regions, not solely through warfare, but also through strategic alliances, treaties, and systems of governance that allowed for a relatively smooth transition of power. Cities opened their gates, populations adapted, and gradually a new identity began to form. This was the birth of Al-Andalus, not just a territory under new rule, but the foundation of a new civilization. As decades passed, Al-Andalus evolved into something far greater than its origins. It became one of the most advanced and sophisticated societies of its time. At its peak, particularly during the 10th century under the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba, it stood as a beacon of progress in a world that was, in many places, still struggling with fragmentation and stagnation. The city of Cordoba itself became a symbol of this transformation. With a population estimated in the hundreds of thousands, it was among the largest cities in the world at the time, a place of light in an age often described as dark. Cordoba's streets were illuminated at night, a feature almost unimaginable in much of contemporary Europe. Public baths were widespread, reflecting an emphasis on hygiene and public health. Clean water systems and advanced urban planning made the city not only livable, but thriving. Markets buzzed with activity, filled with goods from across the known world. The architecture spoke of both beauty and function, with intricate designs, expansive courtyards, and monumental structures such as the Great Mosque of Cordoba, whose arches and patterns still inspire awe today. Yet the true strength of Al-Andalus lay not just in its physical achievements, but in its intellectual life. Knowledge was not a privilege reserved for a few, it was a central pillar of society. Libraries flourished, and it is often said that Cordoba alone housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, a staggering number when compared to other parts of Europe at the time, where books were rare and often inaccessible. Scholars gathered to study, debate, and innovate across disciplines such as philosophy, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and literature. Figures like Ibn Rushd or Averroes contributed profoundly to philosophical thought, while al-Zarawi made groundbreaking advancements in surgery and medical science. Their works would later travel beyond Al-Andalus, influencing European scholars and contributing to the intellectual awakening known as the Renaissance. Justice formed another cornerstone of this society. The legal system in Al-Andalus was structured and principled, with judges known as qadis responsible for interpreting and applying the law. What distinguished this system was its emphasis on fairness and accountability. The law was not meant to serve the powerful alone. It applied to all members of society. Historical accounts suggest that even rulers were not above the law, a principle that fostered trust and stability. In a diverse society composed of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, this sense of justice played a crucial role in maintaining coexistence and social harmony. Administration in Al-Andalus reflected a high degree of organization and efficiency. Cities were carefully planned, with infrastructure that included roads, drainage systems, and water management. Markets were regulated to ensure fairness in trade, with officials overseeing weights, measures, and quality. This level of governance created an environment where economic activity could flourish. Trade became a defining feature of Al-Andalus, connecting it to regions across Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Goods such as silk, leather, ceramics, and agricultural products moved through its aswaq, while gold coins, particularly the dinar, symbolized economic strength and stability. Agriculture, often overlooked in grand historical narratives, underwent a quiet revolution during this period. Muslim farmers and engineers introduced advanced irrigation techniques, including canals and water wheels, which transformed arid landscapes into fertile fields. New crops such as rice, sugarcane, citrus fruits, and various vegetables were cultivated, diversifying the agricultural output and improving diets. This agricultural prosperity not only supported the population, but also contributed to trade and economic growth. Healthcare in Al-Andalus further demonstrated the civilization's commitment to human well-being. Hospitals were established where patients received treatment regardless of their social status. Physicians studied diseases systematically, and surgical procedures were performed with a level of sophistication that would not be seen in many parts of Europe for centuries. The emphasis on cleanliness, observation, and documentation laid the groundwork for future medical advancements. At its height, the population of Al-Andalus is estimated to have been between 5 and 7 million people. Muslims formed the majority, but significant Christian and Jewish communities also lived within its borders. This diversity was not merely tolerated. In many cases, it was integrated into the fabric of society. Different communities contributed to economic, intellectual, and cultural life, creating a dynamic and multifaceted civilization. While not without its tensions, this coexistence remains one of the most discussed and debated aspects of Al-Andalus. Geographically, Al-Andalus once covered most of the Iberian Peninsula, encompassing large parts of what are now Spain and Portugal. Major cities such as Cordoba, Seville, Toledo, and Granada became centers of governance, culture, and innovation. The influence of this civilization extended beyond its borders, shaping the broader Mediterranean world. However, as history has shown time and again, no civilization is immune to decline. The fall of Al-Andalus was not sudden, but gradual, shaped by a combination of internal and external factors. Political fragmentation weakened central authority, leading to the division of the region into smaller kingdoms known as taifas. Rivalries and conflicts among these states undermined unity, making them vulnerable to external threats. At the same time, Christian kingdoms in the north, having consolidated their power, began a sustained effort to reclaim territory. This long and complex process came to be known as the Reconquista. Over the centuries, the balance of power shifted. One by one, major cities fell.
Toledo was captured in 1085, marking a significant turning point. As time progressed, the once powerful Al-Andalus was reduced to smaller and more isolated regions. Eventually, only the Emirate of Granada remained, holding on as the last Muslim stronghold in Iberia.
In 1492, Granada fell. This moment marked the end of nearly 8 centuries of Muslim presence in the region. The surrender was accompanied by agreements that promised religious freedom and protection for Muslims. However, these promises were not fully honored in the years that followed. Gradually, policies of forced conversion were implemented. Mosques were closed or repurposed, and Islamic practices were suppressed. Those who converted to Christianity, whether willingly or under pressure, came to be known as Moriscos. Even this was not the end of their suffering. Suspicion and discrimination persisted, and between 1609 and 1614, the Moriscos were expelled from Spain. Families were uprooted, communities dismantled, and a once thriving population was scattered. This chapter of history remains one of the most painful, raising profound questions about justice, identity, and the treatment of minorities. And so we return to the question, was this justice? Can the contributions of a civilization, its knowledge, its systems, its culture, be separated from its people? Al-Andalus gave the world advancements in science, medicine, philosophy, and agriculture. Its scholars preserved and expanded upon ancient knowledge, bridging gaps between civilizations. Its influence can be traced in the intellectual developments that followed in Europe, particularly during the Renaissance. In many ways, Al-Andalus did not entirely disappear. Its legacy lived on, carried through books, ideas, and cultural exchanges. The translations of Arabic texts into Latin opened new pathways for European scholars. Innovations in science and medicine found their way into universities. Architectural styles, agricultural techniques, and philosophical ideas continued to shape societies long after the political entity of Al-Andalus had vanished. Yet, despite this enduring influence, the human story, the lives of those who built and sustained this civilization, often feels overshadowed by its achievements. The rise and fall of Al-Andalus serves as both an inspiration and a warning. It shows what can be achieved when knowledge, justice, and cooperation are valued. At the same time, it reminds us of the fragility of such achievements when unity breaks down and intolerance takes hold. Al-Andalus was more than a kingdom. It was an idea, a vision of what a society could be when different cultures and faiths found ways to coexist and contribute to a shared future. Its history challenges us to reflect on our own world, on how we preserve knowledge, how we treat diversity, and how we remember the past. Because, in the end, the question is not just about Al-Andalus, it is about us, about whether we learn from history or allow its echoes to fade, about whether civilizations truly disappear or whether they live on in ways we fail to recognize. And perhaps most importantly, it is about whether we can ensure that the lessons of the past are not lost, but carried forward into a future that values the very principles that once made Al-Andalus shine.